Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I want to give a special shout out to one of my subscribers, and I highly appreciate all of you guys and all of the support. I only got love for you guys, and without you I would not be inspired to do any of these videos. So if you like this video and you like this type of content, please like, support the channel. But his name is Waiting for Death and 3B. Thank you, buddy, and thank you for the suggestion. He told me to make this video about how bad some of the stuff in God of War Ragnarok was, and here we are. With that being said, let's get right into why God of War Ragnarok is not a masterpiece in my opinion, and go over certain flaws that the game has. Let's start with Kratos, the God of War himself. This character, defined by his unrelenting rage and godlike strength, a figure who has battled and defeated titans, gods, and monsters alike. In Ragnarok, however, Kratos feels noticeably subdued, while his emotional growth as a father is a beautiful evolution. It comes at the cost of the raw, overwhelming power fans have come to expect. For example, Kratos no longer feels invincible in combat. Enemies overwhelm him more often, even on moderate difficulties, and his moveset, while refined, lacks the sheer brutality of earlier games. It's as if the developers traded his godly dominance for a more humanized portrayal. While this appeals to the narrative, it creates a disconnect in gameplay. Where's the unstoppable warrior who carved his way through Mount Olympus? Next, I want to talk about Atreus, also known as Loki. It's a pivotal character in Ragnarok. His arc is integral to the story, but the game's insistence on making him a co-lead disrupts the balance. The entire section when you're forced to play as Atreus drag down the pacing of the game, especially when his combat feels significantly less dynamic than Kratos. While his bow-based combat and summon abilities are unique, they pale in comparison to the visceral satisfaction of controlling Kratos. The shift in focus can feel jarring, and instead of enhancing the story, it often feels like an attempt to shift the franchise towards Atreus' future adventures. But here's the question: did the developers overestimate how much players will enjoy stepping into Atreus' shoes? Next, I want to talk about the pacing of the game. Ragnarok's pacing is one of its most noticeable flaws. The game alternates between accelerating action sequences and prolonged dialogue-heavy sections, but the balance isn't always right. For instance, there are moments when you are thrust into a breathtaking boss battle only to be followed by 30 minutes of exposition or mundane tasks like collecting items. While the writing and voice acting are often phenomenal, these slow stretches often disrupt the momentum of the game. They can make the game feel bloated, as if the developers prioritize stretching the runtime over maintaining a consistent flow of the game. A tighter narrative focus could have made the emotional beats and epic moments hit even harder. Let's talk about the god of yoga, Tyr. I'm just messing with you guys. But yeah, let's talk about Tyr, the Norse god of war. When Kratos and Atreus first set out to find him, the stakes felt massive. You're told Tyr is this legendary figure, a giant among gods, someone who could rival even Kratos in his prime. So naturally, you expect an intimidating warrior brimming with wisdom and power. Instead, what did we get? A lanky pacifist who looks like he's been leading meditation retreats instead of armies. Tyr spends more time doing yoga poses and spouting pacifist philosophies than actually living up to his title as the god of war of Norse mythology. One of his first scenes was him stretching his limbs and pondering the virtues of peace. And while it's an interesting subversion of expectations, it ultimately undermines his presence in the story. Imagine if Kratos, fresh from defeating Thor, turned to Tyr for advice, and Tyr's response was, "Let's all just take a deep breath and find inner peace." The result is a character who feels utterly disconnected from the weight of the narrative. A god like Tyr should be a symbol of power, wisdom, a figure who could challenge Kratos' ideology or physically even. His pacifist antics make him feel more like a parody of this mythological counterpart. By the time the plot twist involving Tyr unfolds, many players were likely thinking, "Wait, is that Tyr? No wonder he's been so useless." Ah, yes. Most of you came for this part because you love to hate on me, but I don't care, man. If you like to call me a racist, a bigot, hey man, I wear that with a badge of honor. I thank you for watching this video regardless, and this is my opinion. A lot of people love this game. I have no issues with it. But let's talk about the wokeness of this game. Please, I know it's an overused word, but there is wokeness, there is DEI diversity in Norse mythology. This is Scandinavia, for God's sake. Imagine we go to Africa and Kratos goes to Africa and then we race swap 3 of the gods there for white ones. How would you guys react? I just want an answer to that question and nobody answers. But anyways, diversity and inclusion. Okay, so diversity and inclusion are important, yes. But in Ragnarok, these themes sometimes feel shoehorned into the story, rooted in Norse mythology. Yes, I get it's fictional, but still is based on Norse mythology. Certain characters and their interactions come across as modern and out of place, clashing with the mythological setting. It's not that the inclusion of diverse characters is inherently bad, it's the execution that feels unnatural. For instance, some dialogue exchanges feel like they're catering to modern sensibilities rather than staying true to the tone of the ancient world. This can break immersion for players who are deeply invested in the lore and this specific Norse mythology. Subtlety would have gone a long way in weaving these themes into the story without making them feel forced. Like if they gave us a background for Angrboda instead of just having this African girl here out of nowhere, just give her a backstory. Tell us that there's giants and other type of creatures in other realms and that they travel over here. Give us an explanation of why you're in Scandinavia in the ancient times of the gods. And yes, this is Scandinavia. So I don't mind any black characters, I don't mind anything, but let's stay consistent. Would you be okay with race swapping Black Panther? Would you be okay with race swapping the Equalizer? Because I love those characters as they are. I love them being black and I want to keep them that way. So what's the difference here? You get what I'm saying? Let's stay consistent and let's stay away from these double standards. But anyways, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. DEI force initiatives, and we all know that Sweet Baby had a heavy hand in this game. But let's jump into another topic, the lackluster villain depth. Yes, Odin and Thor are 2 of the most iconic figures in the Norse mythology, and their portrayal in Ragnarok had the potential to be legendary. While both of these characters are intriguing, their arcs feel underdeveloped. It's like it was rushed or something. Odin's manipulative nature is intriguing, but his schemes lack the menace to make him feel truly fearsome. Thor, on the other hand, starts strong. His raw power and emotional complexity are captivating. However, his character doesn't get the screen time he deserves. He's relegated to a secondary role in a story where he could have been front and center. The missed opportunity to fully explore this villain's depth leaves the narrative feeling somewhat hollow. Next, the story. One of the greatest strengths of the original God of War reboot was its unpredictability. You never quite knew where the journey was heading. Unfortunately, Ragnarok falls into a more conventional storytelling pattern. Many of the game's big twists and turns are telegraphed well in advance, leaving little room for genuine surprise. Take Atreus' arc for example. From the moment his connection to Loki is revealed, it's easy to see where his character is headed. The same goes for Kratos' internal struggle. While well written, it follows a formula that we've seen countless of times: redemption stories. It's not that these stories are bad, but they lack the innovative spark that made the previous games so memorable. Going back to the Ghost of Sparta, let's talk about the emotional Kratos. Look, Kratos has always been a deeply emotional character, even in the older games, which a lot of people disagree with me, but play those games again and you will see what I'm telling you. But in Ragnarok, his softer side takes center of the stage. While this evolution is compelling from a narrative perspective, it occasionally undermines the character's core identity. There are moments where Kratos feels almost unrecognizable, hesitant, overly introspective, and far too willing to hold back in situations that demand action. Fans love Kratos for his unyielding determination and raw primal rage. Watching him grapple with a fatherhood and mortality is fascinating, but it can sometimes feel like the developers forgot who Kratos was at his core, the god of war. This tonal shift might resonate with some players, but for me and others, it's a departure that leaves the character feeling less like the unstoppable force that we've grown to admire. Jumping into the boss fights. Look, boss fights are a cornerstone of God of War franchise, but Ragnarok leans heavily on repetition. Many of the game's boss encounters feel like reskinned versions of previous fights, particularly the Berserker battles, which are essentially the game's version of the Valkyries. While these fights are challenging and rewarding, the lack of variety becomes noticeable as you progress. Even the major boss battles like Thor and Odin don't fully capitalize on their mythological potential. They're fun, sure, but they lack the cinematic, over-the-top flair that defined the series' earlier entries. It's hard not to feel like the game missed an opportunity to deliver more unique and memorable encounters. Jumping to the side quest. Ragnarok boasts a lot of side quests and favors, as the game calls them. While some of these quests offer compelling lore and emotional depth, many feel like standard fetch quests that pad the game's runtime. Too often you will find yourself retrieving random items or solving simple puzzles that lack meaningful context. These filler tasks don't add much to the story or gameplay, making them feel more like chores than exciting adventures. For a game this ambitious, the side content often fails to match the quality of the main narrative. It's another case of quantity over quality. Next, I want to talk about the over-reliance on nostalgia. Finally, Ragnarok leans heavily on nostalgia, particularly callbacks to original God of War trilogy. While moments like the Blades of Chaos revealed in the previous game were incredible, Ragnarok struggles to recapture that magic. Instead of building on its own foundation, the game often feels like it's trying to remind players of what came before. Whether it's reusing mechanics, bringing back familiar characters, or referencing past events, these moments can feel more like fan service than genuine innovation. Nostalgia is a powerful tool, but relying on it too much can hinder a game's ability to stand on its own. So wrapping this up, my conclusion is that at its core, God of War Ragnarok is a solid game, but calling it a masterpiece might be a stretch. From pacing issues and underwhelming villains to missing opportunities with Tyr, Kratos, Thor, Odin, and all of these epic characters that they could have implemented better, these flaws prevent it from reaching the same heights as its predecessor. It's an enjoyable experience with breathtaking visuals and strong emotional moments, but it's not without its missteps. For many, it will be a good time, but not the revolutionary, flawless sequel it aspired to be. What do you think? Did these flaws bother you, or did the game's strength overshadow them? Let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more gaming breakdown. Thank you, and I will see you on the next one.